am Miranda Materi.
And I'm Shannon Scalbo. I almost said Josh McDonald. And I'm Shannon Scalbo, and we are Hand Therapy Academy.
All right, welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
Josh.
Thank you.
That's funny. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Great. I am ready for your questions of the week.
Okay. My question is, what would you do if you were in my shoes right now? And I mean that in like you are now, so many years into your career. Like if you were now knowing all that you know now, if you were back in your new grad shoes going off to work on your own for the first time, what would you do?
What would I do? Okay, that's a good question. What would I do? And also, this is advice because I kind of know you from having you as a level 2 student and as a capstone student. So I think knowing you, I would say don't, and this could apply to probably a lot of new grads, don't be too hard on yourself. You are not going to know everything and you don't need to know everything. I think a lot of times you think, well, gosh, you get out and you're like, I never learned that in school. And you're just starting to realize how much you don't know, right? I think all new grads are like, oh my gosh, I hardly know anything, even though I just spent the last 3 years in graduate school and I passed my boards and I think I know, but you don't. And I think just really making sure that you're not being too hard on yourself for not knowing. It's okay not to know, and it's okay. Just think about it as a learning process, and this is a journey. So that's one thing. And then I would also encourage a lot of networking. Like, I think it's really exciting when you come out of the field and you're starting. When I started, I was always attending like different hand therapy groups where I would meet different people that were interested in hand therapy and learning from them. And also, it was nice to have people that were in the same place as I was. So they could really relate to me, right? Like, I can kind of remember when that long ago, but not that well. Like, I can't relate to those feelings as much as I could when I was really living it. So I would encourage you to mentor and find people that are maybe learning hand therapy as well, and in a similar time frame. So mentorship, networking, going to conferences, like it's just fun, right? It's fun to be out and fresh in the field. And so I think going to conferences, meeting all those people, and then like how much you learn is at a conference as a new grad is exponential, right? You're going to pick up so many new things. And I think the first one I went to was ASHT, and thinking like, wow, I can't believe I never knew most of this stuff, even though I'd been in the field for almost a year.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, as you know, my first conference in the hand therapy world was AAHS, which is the hand surgery conference. And so, especially like I wasn't even graduated yet. And that felt so wildly outside of anything I knew. Like I was hard just even keeping up with like the acronyms, right, that we use in hand therapy, even though I think I'm a lot better at that now. It was like I could only take away so much. And I think that kind of like leads into my next question of like, I think that's that's an outlier of like how much you need to know. But I think in general, like in hand therapy, sometimes it feels like, where do you start, I guess? And I know like, basic anatomy and stuff like that, but it's like, what have you found to be like the most beneficial in your learning of hand therapy?
I think just doing, for me, it was when I would have a patient come in with that diagnosis. Like, I wouldn't be like, oh, this week I'm going to study distal radius fractures. Next week I'm going to study the elbow. Like, I didn't think of it like that. Like, it wasn't like a regimented study by the systems or the body part, but it was like, oh, tomorrow I see I'm having an evaluation for scleroderma. What is scleroderma? I've never even heard of it, right? Like, I feel like as a new grad, you're like, gosh, I've never even heard of that before. So then I would go and look up the information before I saw them, and then, ask my peers questions and things like that after the evaluation. So I think a great way of learning the information is just doing it case by case, patient by patient. Otherwise, I think could get really overwhelming.
Definitely. That's
Yes.
why I think like my favorite, or how I've most best navigated that is and I don't think there's necessarily stupid questions, but I definitely tend to ask the stupid questions, I think. Like the most basic of basic, where it's like, but what do you mean? Like what does that mean? And why do we think that about that? Because sometimes like just it gives you a better foundation. I find that when I like know the foundation of things a little better, then I can like better explain it to patients in like a layman's way, and that makes me feel like a better therapist, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think because like with you, I think well, what I noticed when you were a student was like you always wanted to know the why and like know it in like a really deep level, which I think is great. I think that's better for when you take the CHT and those tests because you can pull up the answer if you understand it. So I think that's great understanding the why.
Right. And sometimes I think that it's also it's a strength and it's a growth point too, because I think sometimes it's okay to just like let's just accept that for what it is, because I think that also is a thing that leads to burnout too, right? Is like trying to get to
Hmm.
the nitty-gritty of every single thing piece of information that you come across.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a waste of time too, right?
Well,
Um
yeah, but I think like too, just knowing that there's layers to learning and levels to learning, and just like I think with you, you're like, oh gosh, if you're seeing a patient with scleroderma, you want to know every single detail and understand it in like this deep, complex way, and that's really not always doable, right? So this is your first
right.
scleroderma patient. I'm going to get the basics down. Hey, I got another one coming in. I'm going to like each time you see that patient or each time you get that diagnosis, you'll deepen your learning. So I think just having some grace with yourself and some kindness with yourself to not always have to know everything in some complex detail like you want to.
Right, right. And that like the learning will come with time, and it doesn't have to happen now. It doesn't all
Yeah,
have to happen now, right?
you're not going to be a night that, and that's why what's so great about the CHT, right? You can't even take the test for 3 years. It used to be 5 years. No one wants you to have it right now. It's designed to be things that you learn over time.
Definitely. Even though I wish I could just study for the next 6 months and take it now.
Yeah, that's that would defeat the purpose, right?
Right. Do you think
That's
it's like ever too early to start studying for that? Or do you just think like naturally working in the hand therapy clinic, like you are studying for the CHT in like some capacity, right?
Yeah, I think working in a hand therapy cat or hand, working in a hand therapy working in the hand therapy clinic and looking up stuff with your patients is the best learning. And then as it gets closer, start honing in on those things that may not be as applicable to patient care, but are applicable to the test. But I don't think it's ever too early to study. I think that's just an indirect way of studying. And then one thing I love to tell therapists when they're learning is make sure, like you said, you teach it back to your patient. So as we know, anatomy is the foundation to hand therapy. So I would go back and teach them. I would even like pull up Anatomy TV, which is an app that's available or that you have access to, and show them the anatomy. Like this is where it attaches. Like when we're talking about the biceps, it attaches to the radial tuberosity, and that's why it does forearm supination, right? Because in explaining that to the patients can be really, really your way of like really understanding and learning it. Like you read it the night before, but then the next day you're going to go explain it to them, so then you really learn it too. And I think that can
Right.
be helpful.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely the teacher. I'm laughing because of the biceps example. as as a new grad, I just learned a couple weeks ago that the biceps main role is supination, but I feel like in school I always thought it was elbow flexion, and so sometimes it's just it's asking the basics, it's asking the dumb questions. It really is.
Yeah, and yeah, figuring stuff out is in you. Something you're going to be 10 years in, and you're going to be like, "Wow, how did I never knew that?" There's going to be
Right.
stuff like that throughout your career, but I think that's what makes hand therapy great.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Shannon, our time is winding down. Thank you so much for coming on today, and it was great having you. And if we do this again, you'll be one of the first we call.
Thank you.